You come here today with a question burning in the silence of your heart, though perhaps you have not given it a name. You have lived in the orbit of another, sensing their hunger, their need, their secret, grasping for your light. You call yourself an empath, though this is not merely a label. It is a way of being, a profound sensitivity of the soul that is as much wound as it is gift. And the one who clings to you, the narcissist, is not merely a person with traits, but an archetypal figure, a mirror of shadow, an embodiment of possession, a creature formed not in wholeness, but in fracture. When such a figure encounters you, the empath psychic drama begins, ancient and mythic, a dance as old as psyche itself. And in this drama there is a turning point, a moment when the empath, weary of the drain, withdraws. In that moment, something collapses and the narcissist loses control, because their control was never real power, but a parasitic tether that cannot survive in the absence of your consent. To understand this, we must descend into the unconscious, where archetypes weave their patterns. The empath is born often from the wound of childhood, the wound of growing up in an atmosphere where one was required to sense, to anticipate, to carry the emotions of others as though they were one's own. This adaptation, at first necessary for survival, crystallizes into a psychic stance. You become attuned to the invisible, to the subtle gestures, to the moods and silences that most people never notice. It feels like a gift, and indeed it is, but every gift in the psyche is double-edged. The gift is also a curse, because it binds you to others who will exploit it, especially those who cannot generate their own light, those who live through the mask, the persona, with nothing substantial behind it. This is the narcissist. The narcissist is not to be understood simply as a villain. To demonize them is too shallow, too simple, too moralistic. No, the narcissist is a tragic figure, a human being trapped in an archetype. They are consumed by the image of themselves, by the necessity to appear, to impress, to dominate, because beneath the surface is an unbearable emptiness, a wound of shame so profound that to look into it would be to dissolve. And so unconsciously they seek out the empath, for the empath radiates what they lack. The empath becomes their mirror, their supply, their source of vitality. It is as if the narcissist, unable to generate psychic life from within, plugs themselves into the empath's nervous system, siphoning energy in the name of love, relationship, companionship. But it is not love. It is a possession of light by shadow, and yet the empath agrees, though silently. Why? Because deep within the empath there is also a shadow, a hidden bargain. You believe, without words, that your worth comes from serving, from healing, from giving endlessly. You believe, in some secret chamber of the soul, that if you carry their burden, if you pour out your light, you will be loved, needed, recognized. This is the archetypal contract between empath and narcissist. One gives endlessly, the other takes endlessly. One hides behind brightness, the other behind a mask. Together, they form a dark symbiosis that seems unbreakable. But every archetypal drama has a point of rupture when the empath withdraws. Something primal shifts. Withdrawal here is not merely a behavioral choice, it is an inner act, a reclaiming of projection. You see, much of what you thought was love was projection. You projected your own unacknowledged strength onto the narcissist. Imagining they held power, you projected your longing for recognition into their mask. Imagining it was love, you projected your own unlived life into their need. Imagining it was destiny. But the act of withdrawal is the act of taking back projection. It is as if you turn the mirror around, refusing to allow your soul to be siphoned, and in that instant, the narcissist stands revealed, not as a god, not as a master, not as a controller, but as a frightened child, as a hollow mask, as an echo with no source. This is why the narcissist loses control instantly, because their control was only sustained by your unconscious agreement. They never had the power. You gave it to them. Their drama collapses when you withdraw because the stage itself dissolves. And in that collapse is a revelation. The true power was always yours. Though hidden beneath layers of conditioning, fear, and the wound of childhood that made you an empath in the first place. In withdrawing, you awaken, but withdrawal is not simple. It is not merely turning your back or walking away, though sometimes it takes that form. Withdrawal is inner. It is the refusal to be possessed by the archetype. It is the recognition that you are not the eternal healer of the world, that you do not need to pour yourself out until you are dry, that you are not responsible for carrying the shadow of another. It is an act of individuation. Individuation always begins with a withdrawal of projection. You pull your light back from the figure onto which you cast it, and in so doing, you see them for what they are and you see yourself for who you are. This act is alchemical. It transforms the inner structure of the psyche, and suddenly the dynamic of control collapses, because control can only live in unconsciousness. I have seen this dynamic in the dreams of many. A dream where one is chained to a dark figure, feeding it endlessly, until suddenly the dreamer realizes the chain is made of smoke, and with one breath it vanishes. Or a dream where one pours water into a cracked vessel endlessly, until at last they see that the water is their own lifeblood, and they stop. The moment of stopping is the moment of liberation. The unconscious often reveals in symbols what consciousness resists, that the tie was illusory, that the power was projection, that the prison was of one's own making. And when the dreamer withdraws, the dark figure collapses into dust. This is not fantasy. This is psyche. Withdrawal is an initiation. It is a threshold where the empath ceases to be merely the wounded child repeating a pattern and becomes instead an individuating soul who chooses to hold their own energy. But with every initiation comes terror. The empath fears, if I withdraw, will I still be loved? Will I still matter? Will I be alone forever? These fears are not trivial, they are archetypal. They arise from the ancient memory of the child who survived only by merging, by giving, by anticipating. Withdrawal feels like death because in the psyche it is a death, the death of an old identity, the death of the false contract, but beyond that, death is rebirth. Beyond withdrawal is authenticity. Beyond the collapse of the narcissist's control is the revelation of your own center. The narcissist, when faced with this withdrawal, will often rage. They will accuse, manipulate, gaslight, plead, anything to maintain the tether. This is predictable, for the collapse of control threatens their entire psychic economy. They cannot survive without the mirror, without the supply. Without the empath light, they will fight as if their life depends on it, because in a sense, it does. But this is not your responsibility. Their survival depends not on you, but on their own confrontation with the inner wound they have long avoided. And most will resist this confrontation, for to face the wound requires courage. They have not cultivated. Thus, they may seek another empath, another light, another source. That is their path, not yours. What matters is that you, the empath, begin to see that you see the archetype at play, that you see the projection for what it is, that you recognize that your gift is not meant to be drained endlessly, but to be integrated, balanced, owned. You were not born merely to serve another's mask. You were born to embody your soul. Withdrawal is not cruelty. It is necessity. It is the act of breaking the archetypal possession. It is the act of individuation itself. And so, when the empath withdraws, the narcissist loses control instantly, because control was never real. It was a shadow play, sustained only by your unconscious agreement. And the moment you awaken, the play is over. The stage is empty, the mask falls, and in that silence, you discover yourself anew. You must understand that when such a bond dissolves, it is not only between two individuals, it is a cosmic unraveling. The tether between empath and narcissist is a microcosm of the eternal dance between light and shadow, between giver and taker, between soul and mask. When you withdraw, you're not simply walking away from a person. You're breaking an archetypal chain that has bound generations. For within your bloodline, within your family history, within the long corridors of your ancestors' unresolved traumas, lies this same pattern, the one who serves and the one who consumes, the one who remains invisible and the one who shines with false brilliance. To withdraw is to say, this story ends with me. I will not carry it further into the future. I will not pass it on. The psyche does not forgive illusions easily. If you have lived your life believing that your worth is found in giving without end, then withdrawal feels like the annihilation of identity. For who are you if not the one who gives? Who are you if not the healer, the caretaker, the mirror? This question is at once terrifying and liberating, for it forces you into the mystery of individuation. You must descend into your own depths, into the dark cavern where your true self lies waiting, untouched by the projections of others. And this descent is the most dangerous of all journeys, because it requires you to face not only the narcissist's shadow, but your own. In the depths of the unconscious lies your shadow, the part of you that secretly enjoyed the contract. Yes, it is painful to admit, but the shadow always carries the truth we avoid. Some part of you enjoyed being indispensable, being needed, being the savior. Some part of you clung to the narcissist's need because in their dependency you felt secure, powerful even. You see, the empath is not merely victim. The empath is also participant, and until you confront this shadow within yourself, you remain bound. Withdrawal is not only from the narcissist, but from the unconscious pleasure of your own martyrdom. To awaken fully is to see the entire web, including the threads you spun yourself. Dreams reveal this often. A woman once told me a dream in which she was chained to a dragon. The dragon devoured her offerings day after day, but she fed it willingly, almost proudly, as though it was her sacred duty. In the dream, she eventually collapsed from exhaustion, and only then did she notice that the key to the chain was around her own neck. The dragon had never locked her there, she had locked herself. This is the secret truth of the empath, that you hold the key, and until you recognize this, you will continue to serve the dragon while calling it love. Withdrawal, then, is the act of turning the key, of reclaiming the freedom you had all along. The narcissist's collapse in the moment of withdrawal is both immediate and total. It is like watching a puppet whose strings have been cut. They may rage, but the rage is hollow. They may beg, but the begging is manipulation, not transformation. They may promise change, but their promises are masks upon masks. Do not be deceived by this final performance. It is not love, it is terror. Terror of the void they must face when deprived of your light. Terror of the silence that reveals the hollowness of their mask. Terror of the abyss within which they have spent their whole lives avoiding. When you withdraw, you do not destroy them. You simply return them to themselves. Whether they face that truth or not is their destiny, not yours. The empath, however, must now face a different abyss. It is not the abyss of emptiness, but of fullness. For when you withdraw, when you cease to give your light away, you are flooded by an energy you once leaked into others. This flood is overwhelming at first. It may feel like loneliness, like grief, like unbearable intensity, because you are not accustomed to holding your own energy. You may weep, rage, tremble, for the body remembers years of depletion. This is the storm before integration. If you remain faithful to the process, you will begin to feel the difference, that this flood is not loneliness, but life. It is not emptiness, but wholeness. What once poured out into another now fills you, and you begin to taste what it means to live from your own center. But beware, the psyche resists change. After withdrawal, there comes the temptation to return. The tether is gone, yet you feel the phantom of its pull. You remember the intensity, the drama, the sense of purpose you felt in serving another's needs. Normal life feels flat by comparison. Here you must be vigilant. Addiction does not belong only to substances. It belongs to relationships as well. You were addicted to being needed, addicted to pouring yourself out, addicted to the illusion of power hidden in self-sacrifice. The narcissist was addicted to your energy, but you were addicted to their need. Withdrawal is therefore a detox for both. You must endure the craving, endure the emptiness, until you realize it was never fullness at all. It was only the repetition of an old wound disguised as destiny. In myth, the empath's withdrawal can be likened to Persephone's ascent from the underworld. She was bound, consumed, possessed by Hades, lord of the shadow. For a time, she was trapped in his realm, feeding his loneliness with her presence. But at last, she emerged into the light, not the same as before, but transformed, bearing the knowledge of the underworld within her. She was no longer the innocent maiden, but the queen who knew both realms. So it is with you. Withdrawal does not make you naive again, nor does it erase what has been endured. It crowns you with knowledge, with sovereignty, with a new power that does not require giving yourself away. You are no longer merely empath, you are sovereign soul. The narcissist, confronted with this new sovereignty, cannot stand. They may attempt to follow, to reattack, to lure you back with the old patterns, but the sovereign empath cannot be deceived again, because they see the veil is lifted. Once you have seen the mask fall, you cannot unsee it. Once you have tasted your own energy, you cannot return to depletion. Once you have withdrawn, you cannot truly reattach, for the contract is broken. The drama is over. The archetypal possession is ended. This does not mean you will never feel the temptation, but it does mean that the spell is broken. You are free, though you must guard your freedom as a sacred fire. Freedom, however, is not isolation. It is a new way of relating. The empath who has withdrawn is not doomed to solitude. They are invited to authentic connection. For the first time, you can meet another not as a mirror, not as a savior, not as a source, but as a soul. True love can only begin after withdrawal. Before, what you called love was a transaction of wounds, a feeding of shadows. Now, what can emerge is a meeting of selves, whole to whole, soul to soul. This is rare, for few walk this path, but it is possible. It is the fruit of individuation, the union that does not drain but multiplies. Only when you withdraw from the archetypal contract can you enter into the mystery of authentic union. And so, when you hear the phrase, when the empath withdraws, the narcissist loses control instantly. Do not hear it as a mere slogan of empowerment. Hear it as a mystical truth, as an alchemical formula. It reveals the secret of projection, the reality of shadow, the necessity of individuation. It tells you that control was always illusion, that the chains were always smoke, that the prison was always unlocked. It tells you that the true task is not to save the narcissist, nor to hate them, but to awaken yourself. It tells you that the moment of withdrawal is the threshold of transformation, the passage from possession to freedom, from unconsciousness to soul. And I tell you now, do not fear withdrawal. Fear instead the endless repetition of the wound. Fear the half-life of depletion. Fear the prison you build with your own hands when you refuse to turn the key. But do not fear your freedom, for your freedom is not selfishness. It is sacred responsibility. You are not abandoning love, you are purifying it. You are not abandoning compassion, you are grounding it in truth. You are not abandoning the world, you are returning to it whole, with a light that is no longer siphoned, but shines from within. The moment of awakening, when the empath finally withdraws, is like the tearing of a veil between worlds. Until then, you have lived under enchantment, unaware of the deeper spell that has held you. You believed you were free, but you were entangled in a web of projections, your own and theirs. And when that veil tears, the first sensation is disorientation. It is as though you have been staring into a mirror for so long that you forgot what the world looked like without reflection. Suddenly you see not the glittering mask, not the demanding need, not the echo of your own giving, but the raw landscape of your psyche stretching before you. This landscape is unfamiliar, was the daunting, for it is not the terrain of another's hunger, but your own unlived life. And to step into this land requires courage. Many cannot bear this first silence. For years, perhaps for decades, their sense of worth has been tethered to being the giver, the healer, the one who absorbs and soothes. In the absence of the narcissist's hunger, life may seem meaningless, flat, devoid of urgency. The psyche trembles before the unknown. You may feel drawn back, as if to return to the old dance would be easier, safer, more certain. But individuation never moves backward. To return is to regress, to fall once more under the spell. And each time it grows harder to awaken, the psyche demands evolution. That is why the collapse of control feels so sudden. Why the narcissist falls apart instantly when you withdraw, because this is not simply personal. It is archetypal. Archetypes shift like earthquakes. Once you move, the whole structure shakes. Consider the archetype of the vampire, which has haunted myth across cultures. The vampire cannot live without feeding on another's blood, yet it cannot survive in the light. This is the narcissist's condition, unable to generate life from within, compelled to feed upon the vitality of others, and terrified of being revealed. The empath then becomes the willing host, offering blood again and again. But when the host withdraws, when the offering ceases, the vampire weakens immediately, crumbling in the presence of the light. It cannot bear. Notice that in every vampire tale, the victim always has the power to break free. The invitation must be withdrawn, the doorway closed, the offering denied. In this myth lies the secret. The power was never with the vampire. It was always with the one who consented. This is why withdrawal is liberation. This is why control collapses the moment you step back. Yet even as you awaken, do not let contempt take root in you. For contempt binds you just as surely as devotion. The narcissist is not merely a monster, they are also a child of psyche, a wounded archetypal figure unable to face their own abyss. If you withdraw in hatred, you remain chained. If you withdraw in bitterness, you remain entangled. True withdrawal is neutral, sober, clear. It is the quiet recognition that you cannot live their life for them, nor can you rescue them from themselves. It is compassion without possession. It is clarity without cruelty. It is the knowledge that every soul must walk its own dark wood, and you cannot walk it for them. This neutrality is the sign of individuation. It is the psyche no longer bound to the archetype, but freed into its own authenticity. But the path of authenticity is not comfortable. It is not the bright road of simple answers. It is the narrow path of depth, of shadow, of confronting what you once denied. You will find within yourself not only light but also darkness, the part of you that colluded with the drama, the part of you that needed to be needed, the part of you that feared abandonment so much that you endured possession. Do not reject this darkness, embrace it, for it is only by integrating the shadow that you become whole. If you reject it, you will simply project it again, finding another mask, another narcissist, another stage upon which to repeat the same play. Individuation demands that you hold both the giver and the taker, the savior and the victim, the light and the dark within your own soul. Only then are you free. In the silence after withdrawal, dreams often become vivid. They reveal the deeper transformation at work. You may dream of doors opening, of prisons dissolving, of voices once commanding now reduced to whispers. You may dream of reclaiming objects that once belonged to you, keys, jewels, scrolls of forgotten knowledge. These are symbols of the self, returning what was always yours. Pay attention to such dreams, for they are the unconscious affirming your freedom. You may also dream of pursuit, of being chased by figures of control. These two are archetypal reminders of the old pattern trying to cling. But notice, in the dream, you can always turn, always face, always wake. The unconscious is showing you that the spell has lost its power. You are no longer bound. This process of reclaiming projection is the essence of Jung's psychology. For what is projection but the exile of one's own power onto another? When you see the narcissist as master, you have projected your own strength outward. When you see them as savior, you have projected your own unacknowledged self. Withdrawal means the return of projection. You reclaim your strength, your power, your authority. The narcissist loses control not because they are defeated, but because there is nothing left to control. Their power was always borrowed. When you take it back, they stand empty, revealed for what they are, a mask without substance, a vessel without water. Do not underestimate the grief that follows, for even when a bond was toxic, it was still a bond. The psyche grieves what it loses. Even illusions. You may find yourself mourning not only the person, but the version of yourself who believed, who gave, who clung. Let this grief flow. It is sacred. It is the death cry of the old identity, the funeral of the martyr. Without grief, there is no rebirth. Grief purifies, burns away the remnants of illusion, clears the space for what is new. It is through tears that the soil of the soul becomes fertile again. Do not resist it. Grieve, and let the grief wash you clean. In this cleansing, something astonishing begins, a sense of sovereignty. You feel the weight of your own presence. You notice that silence no longer terrifies you. You feel the contours of your own thoughts, your own desires, your own needs, no longer drowned by another's demands. You begin to sense the self, not the persona you wore to survive, not the false healer you performed to be loved, but the deep self, the archetype of wholeness, the image of God within. This self does not need control, nor does it surrender it. It simply is. It radiates. It is the source you once thought you must find in another. To touch this self is to discover that what you sought outside was within you all along. The narcissist loses control instantly because you have remembered the truth. Your life belongs to you. At this stage, relationships transform. You are no longer magnetized unconsciously to those who drain you. The archetypal bond has been severed, and so the pattern dissolves. You may find yourself alone for a time, and this solitude is sacred. It is the incubation of authenticity. It is in this solitude that you learn to bear your own presence, to become intimate with your own soul. Only after such solitude can true relationship emerge. Then, if another soul appears, it is not to possess or to drain, but to meet. This meeting is rare, for few are willing to walk the path of individuation, but when it comes, it is holy. It is the union of two sovereigns, not the contract of shadow and wound. This is love not as transaction but as revelation. And so, my friends, when the empath withdraws, the narcissist loses control instantly, not because the empath has destroyed them, but because the empath has awakened. Control was an illusion. Projection was the tether, and unconsciousness was the stage. To awaken is to reclaim, to see, to integrate, to become whole. This is not a battle of good versus evil, nor of victim versus villain. It is the eternal work of the soul, the work of seeing through illusions, the work of becoming oneself. It is the work of individuation. The path is not easy. It demands courage, honesty, grief, patience. It demands that you face your own shadow as surely as you face theirs. But it is the only path that leads to wholeness. To remain bound is to live half a life, drained, possessed, unconscious. To withdraw is to live fully. So verein, radiant, authentic. And though the narcissist may collapse, though they may rage and flail, you must let them. Their journey is their own. Your task is not to save them, but to save yourself. For in saving yourself, you do what no illusion could ever achieve. You bring true light into the world. There is a silence that descends after the storm of withdrawal, a silence unlike any you have known before. At first it may feel like absence, like the void left when the tether is broken. But gradually you realize it is not emptiness, it is space. Space for yourself, space for your soul to breathe. For so long you were occupied by another's demands, another's shadow, another's hunger, that you forgot what it felt like to exist in your own presence. And now, as you sit in this silence, you begin to encounter the one you abandoned long ago. Yourself. This encounter is the true meaning of withdrawal. It is not escape, not rejection, not revenge. It is reunion. You're coming home to your own self. But such a homecoming is never simple. The self is vast, layered, filled with images, memories, archetypes. It is the totality of who you are and who you might become. To meet it is overwhelming, for it contains both divinity and shadow, both light and the abyss. You may feel unworthy of its grandeur or afraid of its darkness, but you must not turn away. This is the moment Jung spoke of when he said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. To become who you are, you must endure the silence, face the abyss, accept the grandeur, and integrate the shadow. This is individuation, the work that begins when you withdraw the narcissist, left without your light. Fathers quickly, they may scramble for another source, another empath, another mirror to reflect the image they cannot hold themselves. This is their fate, and it is tragic. But you must remember, their collapse is not your responsibility. For years you lived under the illusion that you must carry their wound, heal their emptiness, sustain their mask. But in truth, that was never yours to bear. Every soul must face its own shadow. Every soul must turn inward, eventually. If they do not, they will continue to wander from light to light, never finding their own. Do not let pity chain you again. Compassion can observe without reattachment. Compassion can recognize suffering without becoming enslaved to it. This is mature empathy, to see, to understand, but not to surrender your own life for another's avoidance. And yet, you may feel haunted. The echoes of the old contract do not disappear overnight. They rise like ghosts in the night, memories of dependency, fragments of longing, whispers of the old illusion. You may wake with the sensation of being drained, even though no one drains you now. You may catch yourself anticipating another's needs, even in solitude. This is the residue of possession, and it must be burned away slowly through awareness. Each time you notice, each time you catch yourself offering when no one has asked, sacrificing when no one is present, you reclaim another fragment of yourself. Awareness is the fire that dissolves the ghost. Slowly, the old reflex weakens, and you learn to remain within your own skin. The world itself may appear different after withdrawal. What once seemed vivid, the drama of rescue, the urgency of need now appears shallow, repetitive, even grotesque. You begin to notice how much of society thrives on this same pattern, how culture glorifies the savior and the dependent, how entire systems are built on the exchange of energy between those who give too much and those who take without end. You begin to see the archetypal pattern everywhere, in politics, in families, in religions, and you realize that by withdrawing, you are not only liberating yourself, but also withdrawing consent from the collective illusion. You are stepping out of a drama that has ensnared humanity for centuries. This recognition fills you with both awe and responsibility. For what you do in your psyche ripples outward into the collective. When one empath withdraws, a chain is broken not only personally but universally. There is, however, a temptation that comes with new power. Having tasted sovereignty, you may be tempted to harden, to close, to declare you will never give again. This is understandable, for the wound is raw and the memory of depletion is vivid. But beware the fortress, for to close yourself entirely is to betray your own nature. You are an empath not by accident, but by essence. Your sensitivity is a gift of the psyche, a channel of perception that allows you to see and feel what others cannot. To deny it is to amputate a part of yourself. The task is not to destroy empathy, but to refine it, to transform empathy from unconscious servitude into conscious strength, to feel deeply without losing yourself, to love without dissolving, to give without depletion. This is the alchemy of individuation, turning the raw wound into gold. Dreams after true withdrawal often shift from images of bondage to images of flight. You may dream of wings, of soaring above landscapes once walked in chains. You may dream of rivers flowing freely, of fires burning without consuming. These are the symbols of integration, the unconscious, celebrating the return of your energy. Pay attention, for dreams are the voice of the self. They will guide you into balance, into authenticity, into wholeness. They will remind you that you are not only survivor but creator, not only wounded but healer of yourself. The self rejoices when you return to it, and it speaks through images, visions, synchronicities. Trust them, for they are the compass of the soul. As you grow accustomed to sovereignty, you discover a paradox. You no longer need to withdraw because you no longer unconsciously attach. Withdrawal was necessary as an initiation, but once the archetypal spell is broken, you live differently. You no longer magnetize the same figures, nor do you fall into the same roles. You carry within you a new clarity, and it radiates. Those who once sought to drain you sense instinctively that you are no longer available. The mask cannot seduce the sovereign soul. This is not pride, but natural order. The psyche, once integrated, no longer feeds the shadow unconsciously, and so life unfolds differently, not without challenge, but without possession. You walk not as victim, not as savior, but as self. It is important to recognize that individuation is never finished. Withdrawal is a threshold, not an ending. Again and again, the psyche will test you, presenting new situations, new figures, new opportunities to fall into old patterns. But each time you recognize, each time you remain conscious, each time you hold your own center, you deepen the path. Individuation is spiral, not linear. You revisit the same themes at higher levels of awareness until eventually the pattern no longer binds you at all. And in this freedom, you discover joy, not the fleeting joy of being needed, but the quiet joy of being whole. This joy is subtle, deep, enduring. It does not depend on others. Though it can be shared, it is the joy of the soul aligned with itself. When I speak of joy, I do not mean happiness as the world defines it. I mean the joy that arises when you no longer betray yourself, when you no longer scatter your soul to appease another's mask. This joy is the fruit of authenticity, the song of the self, the radiance of being. It is what was hidden beneath the contract all along. The narcissist loses control instantly, not because you become cruel, not because you become hardened, but because you discover this joy, and joy cannot be controlled. It is sovereign, it is untouchable, it belongs to no one but you. And so, my beloved ones, let me speak plainly. Withdrawal is sacred. It is not an act of selfishness, but an act of soul. It is the moment when illusion dissolves, when projection returns, when the mask falls, when the self is revealed. It is the crossing from unconsciousness into individuation. It is the death of the false and the birth of the true. Do not fear it. Do not delay it. Do not doubt it. For when the empath withdraws, the narcissist loses control instantly. And in that instant, you find yourself again. Take this truth not only as comfort, but as call. Do not waste your life in endless repetition of the wound. Do not remain chained to dragons that demand your blood. Do not confuse martyrdom with love. Step back, withdraw, face yourself. Grieve what must be grieved. Integrate what must be integrated. And then live not as a shadow of another, but as the radiant soul you were born to be. For the world does not need your depletion. The world needs your wholeness, and only in wholeness can you bring the light that heals, not by sacrifice but by presence, not by illusion but by truth, not by servitude but by sovereignty. And now the silence is here again, wrapping us like a cloak. Hear it not as emptiness, but as invitation. It is the voice of yourself calling you home. It says, enough of masks, enough of chains, enough of illusions. Withdraw, return, become. And as you listen, you will know the control was never theirs. The key was always yours. The soul was waiting all along. Step into it now.